They didn't say my name when I walked out the door. No pleading, no questions, not even a whisper of doubt in their eyes. Just silence, tight-lipped, ironed with centuries of expectation. My mother clutched her rosary like it would save her from the disgrace of me. My father, stiff behind his desk, stared straight through me like I'd already been buried. I was not screaming. I was not crying. But inside, I was bleeding out. Slow, invisible. 1,000 silent wounds cut by people who claimed to love me. All because I said no. No to a man I barely knew. No to becoming the prize at the end of someone else's negotiation. No to disappearing into a life built by other people's rules. I didn't think it would be brave. I didn't do it to rebel. I just wanted my life to be mine. But apparently, that made me disposable. You dishonor us, my father said, voice like a blade. You are no longer welcome under this roof. May God forgive you. As if I was the sin. They stripped my name from the family register like ink could erase blood. My cousins were told not to speak to me. My uncles, aunts, neighbors. They looked away when they passed me on the street, as if my presence could infect their daughters. And I carried that silence like a shroud. I didn't know where to go. I had no plan. I only had a suitcase and the sound of the front gate locking behind me. That was my farewell. Let me pause here. If you're still watching, I just want to say, thank you. If you've ever been cast aside for choosing yourself, this story is yours too. Tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. Let's keep going. I was 22. No job, no money, just a degree in literature they used to be proud of. Back when they thought I'd marry into wealth and recite poetry at dinner parties. Back when my education was a ribbon, not a rope I'd use to escape. The first night, I stayed with a friend who offered her couch. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, trying to make sense of it all. I kept waiting for a message, a call. Even anger would have felt like connection. But they cut me off like a branch too diseased to keep. I was no longer a daughter. I was something else now, something foreign, untethered, free, but exiled. And freedom, when it comes like that, torn, not chosen, can feel a lot like drowning. I found a tiny studio apartment with peeling paint and windows that screamed every time you opened them. The kind of place where the walls remember other people's grief. I cleaned it like I was scrubbing the shame off my skin. I took jobs, any jobs, bookstore clerk, waitress, typist, sometimes all in the same week. I rationed rice and counted coins at laundromats. There were days I cried behind bathroom stalls because someone had called me ma'am too coldly, or because I saw a father and daughter laughing over ice cream. You start to feel like you imagined the life you came from, that maybe it never really existed, or that you were never fully part of it. But I didn't go back. Not even when winter came and my heater broke and I wrapped myself in sweaters like armor. Not even when I saw my family in the paper, smiling beside the man they'd tried to marry me off to, his arm around a different girl, her eyes as hollow as I'd feared mine would become, and definitely not when I saw my mother at the market once. We locked eyes for half a second. She looked away like I was a stranger or a ghost. I still don't know which one would have hurt less. The truth is, I stopped recognizing myself too. Every time I looked in the mirror, I expected to see the girl who used to wait for her father's approval after piano recitals. The one who dressed modestly to avoid judgment. The one who swallowed her opinions like stones. But she was gone, replaced by someone harder, sharper, but still aching. I didn't know it at the time, but that was the wound. Not just the exile, the betrayal of love that claimed to be unconditional until it wasn't. The realization that my worth had a price tag, that if I didn't play my role, I didn't belong. And yet, even in the ache, I felt something else stir. Not anger, not yet, but a quiet defiance. A voice inside whispering, "They think you are gone. They think you are nothing now. But they don't know what nothing can become when no one's watching." So I stayed silent. I stayed low. I worked. I listened. And deep down, a seed began to grow. Not of revenge, not of bitterness, but of becoming. Becoming someone they couldn't recognize. Someone they couldn't control. Someone they'd regret underestimating. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was I had been erased. And somehow, I was still here. I stopped counting the days after the third week. Time blurred. I wasn't living. I was folding into the seams of the world, trying not to take up space. No more mirrors. No more family photos. No more, what do you want to do with your life? Only shifts, tips, exhaustion, receipts. I took a job at a Persian bakery 3 blocks from my apartment. They didn't ask questions. The owner barely spoke to me unless it was about dough rising or credit card receipts. The smell of rosewater and cardamom filled the cracks of my silence. Sometimes I'd stand in the back just breathing, eyes closed, pretending it was my mother's kitchen, before she stopped looking me in the eye. The apartment was smaller than most people's closets. The ceiling leaked when it rained. A single moth kept returning to the window, like it couldn't believe this was where I ended up. I named it loyalty. It was the only thing that kept coming back. I started taking the bus late at night. Not to go anywhere, just to move. Glendale to Echo Park to Koreatown, Koreatown to nowhere. I'd sit by the window and watch other people's lives pass by. Families laughing through rolled-down windows, couples arguing, dogs pulling their owners too fast. Sometimes I'd press my hand to the cold glass and pretend I was on the inside looking out. That's when I cut my hair. It wasn't a moment of empowerment. It wasn't a movie scene. It was quiet. Surgical. I tied it in a thick rope behind me and sliced through it with a pair of dull kitchen scissors at 2:13 a.m. And when it hit the sink, I didn't cry. I looked at the mirror and whispered, "There she goes." And in her place, Amara Hale. Not the daughter of Mahmoud and Layla. Not the girl promised to a family she never chose. Just Amara. No past, no legacy, no name that got heavy in other people's mouths. I started keeping a journal, little pieces of me in margins and smudged ink. I didn't write full entries, just fragments, ghosts of thoughts. Some days I only wrote one line. I don't know who I'm becoming, but she doesn't flinch. Other days, just a question. If I vanished, who would miss me? And once, on a folded napkin from a bus stop bench, maybe I was never lost. Maybe they just never looked. That one I kept in my coat pocket, over my heart. I worked mornings at the bakery, afternoons at a used bookstore on Brand Boulevard. The owner was 72 and barely noticed I was alive. Perfect. I shelved books alphabetically, swept corners no one looked at, and read poetry under the register between customers. I lived off stale baklava and instant ramen. Sometimes, for a luxury, I'd buy fresh fruit, a peach, a tangerine. I'd hold it in my hand for minutes before eating it, like it owed me something. I didn't speak much. Words felt expensive, and every time I opened my mouth, I worried I'd say something too real and unravel myself, so I stayed silent, not out of shame anymore, but because silence became a kind of power. Invisibility was armor. When no one sees you, no one can shape you. But there was a night I'll never forget. It was early February, cold for Glendale. I had just finished both jobs. My back ached, my eyes burned. I stepped off the last bus 2 blocks from my apartment and noticed my hands shaking. I had $4.12 in my pocket. That night, the heater gave out again. I wrapped myself in every piece of clothing I owned. I lit the stove for warmth, left the door open, and sat on the floor with my knees to my chest. And I broke. I didn't sob. I unraveled. Slowly, quietly, the way trees fall in forests no one's listening to. I whispered to the dark, "I'm trying. I swear I'm trying." I don't know who I was speaking to. God. The version of me I buried. The moth that never came back. All I know is, when I woke up the next morning, curled on the cold kitchen tile with a journal pressed to my ribs. I didn't feel broken. I felt empty. And strangely, that was a start. That's when I met her. It was at the bookstore. I was restocking a shelf of business biographies when a woman came in asking for a title we didn't carry. Her voice was confident but not rushed. She looked like the kind of person who noticed things most people ignored, like how some books lean a little too far forward on the shelf. She asked about the owner, then about me. Not in a nosy way. In a, "what are you doing hiding in here" way. She said she ran a small mentorship nonprofit for underrepresented women starting businesses. I told her I wasn't starting anything. She smiled. Not the patronizing kind. The kind that says, "You don't know yourself yet, do you?" She left a card. I stared at it that night. Turned it over twice. Thought about throwing it away. But I didn't. Something inside me stirred, like someone tapping gently on a door that hadn't been knocked on in months. A name. A conversation. An invitation. It wasn't hope. Not yet. But it was the first hand extended into my silence. I didn't call her right away. The business card sat on my dresser like a seed I was afraid to plant. For a week, I stared at it between shifts, between breaths, between pages of my journal. I kept asking myself, what if she sees through me? But then I thought, maybe that's exactly what I need. Her name was Lena Castillo, founder of a quiet little powerhouse called Respark. Their mission was simple: equip women with the tools, funding, and community to build something of their own. Nothing flashy. No viral ads. Just doorways, cracked open for those who'd been locked out too long. When I finally emailed her, I half expected silence. Instead, I got a reply within an hour. "Come by next Tuesday. I think we've been waiting for you." She didn't know who I was. She didn't ask for my story. She just made space. That first day, I sat in a circle of 7 other women, each of us with different scars, different shadows. One had left an abusive marriage and was learning to code. Another had come from prison and wanted to open a food truck. I didn't know what I wanted. I only knew I couldn't go back to invisibility. So I started small. Lena handed me a stack of worn books: business basics, financial literacy, emotional resilience. I devoured them like they were sacred texts. I took notes until my hands cramped. I asked questions even when my voice shook. Then I started noticing things: patterns, systems, the way money moved, the way decisions were made, how real power didn't always sit at the head of the table, but often behind the clipboard in the corner. I watched. I listened. I mapped everything in a second journal: diagrams, quotes, mindsets. "Power doesn't announce itself," Lena once said. "It watches to see who notices it first." I started noticing everything. When the bakery owner had a bookkeeping error, I offered to help, quietly. He grunted approval but never asked how I knew spreadsheets. When a customer at the bookstore needed a rare title for a grant program, I found it within an hour, and 3 weeks later, she came back with 10 more clients. The owner never credited me. He barely looked up. But I didn't need the applause. I was building muscle under the surface. Every time someone overlooked me, I learned to move without being seen. Every time someone underestimated me, I sharpened my intuition. I became a quiet architect in other people's chaos. Lena started giving me more responsibility at Respark, helping run workshops, coordinating speakers, tracking donor data. I didn't have a title, but I didn't need one. People began asking for me by name. Women emailed me at night asking for advice, for feedback, for guidance. I started showing up early and leaving last, not because I had something to prove, but because I finally felt like I was shaping something real. One night, Lena pulled me aside after everyone had left. "You ever thought of starting something of your own?" she asked. I froze. "Like a business?" She nodded. "You already are. You just haven't named it yet." That night, I walked home with her words echoing in my chest. I opened my journal and wrote, The world erased my name, but I am writing a new one. In silence, in shadow, in stone. I didn't know what I would build, but I knew how I'd build it. With care, with integrity, without the need to be seen. Weeks passed, then months. The bakery expanded, and I helped set up the second location's inventory system. The bookstore closed down, and I helped the owner liquidate his assets. He never thanked me, but he also never forgot me. Respark's board quietly offered to sponsor me for a micro-funding grant if I ever chose to launch something. In my spare time, I read about supply chains, family enterprises, profit sharing, tax structures. Not because I needed it, but because I felt like I was being prepared for something. Like the silence was sculpting me. Sometimes I'd walk past my parents' street, just to feel the wind of what I used to be. The house still stood, pristine, curtains drawn. A garden my mother used to tend. I never went closer than the sidewalk. I didn't need to. I wasn't that girl anymore. One morning, as I was riding the bus to Respark, a flyer caught my eye. Hale Family Foods, 30th Anniversary Celebration. Right there, bold, smiling photos. My father in the center, my cousin beside him. I felt nothing. Not rage, not sadness, just distance. Until I noticed one small line in the bottom corner. Now franchising. Glendale location up for lease. My fingers went cold. My breath caught. That building. It was their first. The family's flagship. The one my grandfather started with his bare hands. They were letting it go. And something inside me, something old and buried, opened its eyes. I don't know how long I stood there, holding that flyer. But when I sat down that night, I wrote 5 words in bold ink. Maybe this is the beginning. Because in that moment, for the first time since they'd cast me out, I didn't just feel capable. I felt chosen. By something bigger than legacy. I closed my journal, looked out the window, and whispered to the dark, they made me disappear. But they never stopped my hands from learning how to build. It started with a text from Lena. You may want to attend this. Attached was a digital flyer. Hale Family Foods, new franchise launch gala, hosted at the Glendale Civic Center. Guests, industry insiders, city officials, potential investors. And beneath it, in sharp gold lettering, keynote, the Hale legacy, honoring tradition, embracing innovation. I stared at the image for a long time. There was my father again. Immaculate suit, same stone face, shaking hands with people he used to mock for having Western values. My cousin Laith stood behind him now. Groomed, grinning, wearing the Air title like it was tailored. They were dressing up survival as success. And then I saw it, a single line tucked into the footer. Glendale flagship opening under new ownership. I read it 3 times before the weight of it settled. They had sold the original store. Not to a family member, not to a loyal partner. To a silent buyer with no name attached. They didn't know it was me. But they would. Lena helped me arrange everything. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't need to prove anything. But I needed to be seen, fully, silently, as I am now. Not for revenge, for reckoning. That night, I wore a black suit. Clean, tailored, nothing flashy. I pinned my hair back, wore no jewelry. I looked like a shadow that had learned how to walk like light. The Civic Center was buzzing. Chandeliers, string quartet, catered wine and appetizers with edible flowers. Men in tailored suits, women in power heels. Industry voices pretending they'd always supported culturally rooted brands. I stood near the back of the ballroom. No one recognized me. Why would they? I'd vanished from their world years ago, erased like bad ink. The Hale family stood on a low stage. My father, mother, Laith, and a few uncles. My mother looked older, her scarf tighter, her posture more rigid. My father still wore that indestructible calm that once terrified me. Laith stepped forward to speak. Tonight, he said, we celebrate a new chapter. My grandfather built something from nothing. My father expanded it. And now, we honor that legacy by stepping into the future. There was applause, flashbulbs, someone cried. Then came the announcement. We're proud to share that our original Glendale location has officially transitioned to its next phase, under the leadership of a new partner who, while choosing to remain private, represents the values we stand for. People clapped again. My mother's smile froze for a second. My father didn't move. I stepped forward. Not rushed, not dramatic. Just enough. Through the crowd, in full view of the stage. Lath's voice caught in his throat. My mother blinked, visibly pale. A ripple moved through the guests like a wave breaking against disbelief. My father turned, and for the first time in my life I saw something in his face that I had never seen before. Recognition, not just of my face, but of my power. He opened his mouth and closed it. I didn't speak, I didn't wave, I didn't nod. I simply stood there. Tall, unapologetic, the erased daughter. Now the silent owner of the ground beneath their feet. Someone whispered nearby, "Is that?" Another voice replied, "She owns the location?" Gasps, shifts, heads turning, cameras lowering. And then, without a word, I turned. Walked down the aisle. Past servers with silver trays. Past uncles who once shook their heads. Past women who taught their daughters not to become me. The doors opened. Cool night air poured in. As I stepped out onto the concrete steps, I felt no vengeance, only clarity. Let them spin stories. Let them whisper. They knew now. And knowing was enough. Behind me, the music resumed. But nothing was the same. I didn't have to speak to reclaim what they tried to bury. I simply showed up. And that was louder than anything I could have said. The call came 2 days after the gala. Unknown number. No voicemail, no text. I knew who it was before I answered. I let it ring twice, then 3 times. I waited. Let them wonder if I'd decline. On the 4th ring, I picked up. "Hello?" Her voice was slower than I remembered. Softer, like it had been sanded down by time and pride. "Amara, it's your mother." She said it like it still belonged to her. Your mother, like the title had never expired. I didn't speak. I didn't make it easy. After a pause, she cleared her throat. "I was hoping we could talk. Maybe have lunch? I know a place you used to like." I let the silence hang like fog. She continued. "Your father, well, he'd like to see you too. He's been asking about you." A lie. My father doesn't ask questions unless the answers benefit him. But I agreed to meet her. Not out of curiosity. Not out of longing. But because I wanted to look into the face of the very system that taught me exile was love. And see if it even remembered why it banished me. We met at a garden cafe in Atwater Village. Somewhere public. Neutral. I arrived early. I watched from across the street as she stepped out of the car, clutching a handbag that still matched her shoes. She spotted me. Smiled with restraint. Sat down across from me like I was a visiting diplomat. "You look well," she said. "Very professional." I nodded once. "You look smaller than I remember." She blinked, unsure whether to laugh. "Ah, well, time does that." We ordered. Or rather, she ordered for us, like old times. Except I didn't flinch this time. Then came the performance. "Your cousin Lath was surprised to see you." Everyone was. She stirred her tea too long. "We didn't even know you were still in Glendale." I said nothing. She leaned forward. "The family business has been shifting. Your father's been under pressure. New competitors. The new landlord of the flagship location has been making expansion complicated. Lease terms are tighter than we expected." There it was. The ask. Dressed in silk. "We were hoping," she continued, "maybe you'd be willing to reconsider some terms. Or even consult. Quietly. You always were good with systems. Your father has said so. My father once told me I was a shame to his legacy. Now I was good with systems. Fascinating." She softened her tone. "You've clearly become someone. I know we didn't see it then. But look at you now, owning things, making a name. False praise is sweeter than poison. I looked at her, not at the woman, but at the structure behind her. The scaffolding of culture and control that had taught her how to speak this way, how to seduce with compliments, how to coat shame in admiration. She reached across the table, touched my hand. I think your father would be open to reconciling. There it was again. Reconciling. As if I had also wronged him. As if abandonment had been mutual. I slowly pulled my hand back and rested it on my lap, straightened my spine. Let her wait. And then, with the clarity of someone who no longer fears exile, I said, "You didn't lose me because I failed you. You lost me because I survived you." Her face didn't move at first. Then her lips parted, but no sound came out. She wasn't expecting pain from me. She was expecting hunger, regret, maybe even a plea to belong again. But not this. Not a daughter who had nothing left to prove. I stood slowly, placed my napkin on the table. I'm not your secret weapon. I'm not your shame either. I'm just not yours. She looked down. She couldn't hold my gaze, and that was when I knew. They weren't reaching out to bring me back. They were reaching out to reclaim their illusion of control. But I wasn't theirs to reclaim. As I turned to leave, she said quietly behind me, "You're still my daughter." I paused, then turned my head just slightly and said without venom, "You had a daughter. You chose your image instead." And I walked away. Not triumphant, not angry, just whole, no longer haunted, no longer waiting. They wanted my power without my presence, but I was done being an asset in someone else's story. Now, I was writing my own. It started with a ping, a news alert, then a second, then a phone call from Lena. "You might want to sit down," she said, voice taut. Someone had leaked an old video, grainy, clipped, clearly edited for scandal. The footage showed me at 22, walking out of my parents' house, a suitcase in one hand. My father's voice in the background, raised. Mine, defiant, quiet, final. Then came the voiceover, spliced in by some local investigative channel. "The new owner of Hale family's flagship location isn't who she claims to be. What forced Amara Hale into exile? And what is she hiding now?" It wasn't just invasive, it was orchestrated. By noon, it was on Twitter, Instagram, a thread on Reddit titled, "The Secret Shame Behind Hale Foods' Empowered Owner." They dragged up everything they could. My estrangement, my refusal to marry, the scandal that had shamed the Hale name. They made it sound like I was dangerous, dishonest, unstable. I read every word, and I didn't blink once. Lena offered to go to war for me, PR counters, press releases, takedowns. But I told her no. No denials, no fire. Let them scream. Let the dust rise. When it settles, I'll still be standing, because this time I had nothing to hide. But I did want to know who pulled the thread. So I traced it. Not through the internet, but through the silences. A reporter named Rami, young, hungry, had been pitched the footage by a private source connected to the Hale family. The metadata was scrubbed, but the timestamp was years old. The audio was compressed, clearly lifted from an old security archive. Only one place that footage could have come from. The Hale house. My father's study had cameras facing the entry. He always said it was for security, but we all knew it was for control. That night, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in 6 years. My cousin, Laith. He picked up on the second ring. "Amara." The voice was calm, rehearsed. "Didn't expect to hear from you." "You leaking family secrets now?" I asked, tone light, like I was in on the joke. A pause. Too long. "I don't know what you're talking about." Ah, the first lie. I smiled to myself. Thought you might want credit, seeing how fast the media jumped. "I don't control what reporters dig up." Second lie. "You were always good at lying, Laith, but never very good at checking who was watching." Silence. I softened my voice. You're scared. That I'll take more than just the building. Another silence, but heavier now. There it was. The truth behind the betrayal. He wasn't just afraid of me owning the storefront. He was afraid I'd keep going. That the girl they erased wouldn't stop at reclaiming one title. She'd build her own throne. It was a mistake, he finally muttered. Just, family matters should stay private. I let out a quiet breath. You made me a secret. Now the world's just seeing what you tried to bury. I didn't need his confession. His pauses were enough. After we hung up, I opened my journal, wrote one line. Power reveals, but betrayal clarifies. In the days that followed, the headlines burned hot, then fizzled. People love a scandal, but they love a comeback more, and they respect silence when it's laced with certainty. I didn't deny the video, didn't explain it, didn't apologize. I released one statement, short and firm. What they tried to use against me is exactly why I'm here today. I do not regret refusing to disappear. That was it. The press couldn't spin it. And the people who once whispered now applauded. I wasn't the fallen daughter anymore. I was the woman who had risen without permission. But the betrayal did something else too. Something I didn't expect. It clarified my next move. I wasn't going to stop with one building. And I wasn't going to keep playing by their rules, not even in silence. Because now, I knew what I was up against. And now, they knew too. I didn't expect the call. It came one morning while I was walking through the Glendale location, my location, doing what I always did, checking the shelves, straightening the spice displays, noting customer comments on the wall. Lena answered my phone when it rang. She looked at the screen and her expression changed. It's your father's assistant, she said quietly. He's in the hospital. I nodded once, took the phone, listened without emotion as the woman on the other end described the stroke. Partial paralysis, slurred speech, a request, his request, to see me. It was the first time my father had asked for me in almost 7 years. I didn't say yes right away. I let it sit. Not out of anger, but because I had finally earned the right to decide what I owed, and to whom. 2 days later, I went. Not to comfort, not to forgive, but to witness the end of a dynasty that once tried to erase me. The hospital was cold and white, the kind of place where pride goes to die quietly. I walked the halls with calm steps, nodding to nurses. When I entered the room, I stood at the doorway before he even saw me. My mother sat at his side, her face pale, lined with something that looked like surrender. She looked up, then down again. She didn't speak. My father turned slowly. His eyes were clear but dimmed. Age had softened the steel in them, but not the sharpness. When he saw me, he blinked hard, as if trying to decide whether I was memory or flesh. Amara, he said, mouth slow, voice uneven. It was the first time I'd heard him say my name since the day I left. I said nothing. He tried again. You have done well. The words came like stones being lifted one by one. He gestured weakly to the TV in the corner, muted, displaying a local news segment. Hale flagship reinvented, a legacy passed to a new generation. My face on screen, my name, not attached to scandal, but to reinvention, to progress, to quiet power. He watched me watching him. Then, slowly, he lifted his hand. He reached for mine. I didn't move. Instead, I said, with the softest voice I'd ever used in his presence, I am not here to make peace. I am here because I am not at war. His hand trembled. His eyes welled, just slightly. I stepped forward, placed a folded envelope on the table beside him. Inside, a formal letter terminating all remaining Hale licensing rights on my property. The flagship was no longer theirs in name, contract, or myth. It was mine. Not stolen, not gifted, claimed. As I turned to leave, my mother spoke for the first time. Amara, wait. I stopped. She looked up. Her voice wasn't pleading. It was hollow. I hope, someday, you'll understand. I turned to face her and simply replied, I did. That's why I left. And I walked out. No tears, no retribution, just silence. The sound of a daughter finishing her sentence. That fall, we hosted a press gathering at the reopened flagship. Not for spectacle, for legacy. My legacy. The walls were lined with black and white photos of immigrant hands kneading dough, planting herbs, weighing spices. Not my family's faces, just symbols of labor, of roots, of quiet beginnings. I stood in front of the crowd, poised, centered. Lena beside me, no microphone, just my voice. I was once told that tradition was more important than truth, that obedience was the highest form of love, but I've learned something else. That truth is the tradition I honor. That building, something from the ashes of silence, can be more sacred than inheriting gold. They clapped. But I didn't bow. I just smiled. Small, sure, unshakable. That night, after everyone left, I stayed behind. I walked through the aisles of the store, touching jars, adjusting lights, inhaling the scent of cinnamon and clove that now smelled like home. In the back office, I opened my journal one last time, wrote only this. They tried to bury me beneath a name, but I grew into someone they could never name again. Then I lit a single candle and burned the first journal entry I ever wrote. Ash curled gently in the air, caught the light, and disappeared. I stood still, quiet, whole. This is Velvet Revenge, where quiet stories hit hard. Tell me your city in the comments so I know who's riding with us. And if this story got you, subscribe. It only gets deeper from here. Thank you for your time.